EU summit set to start today, and it is widely said that we'll be seeing some kind of bailout package from France and Germany for Greece. What do you make of all this news? Do you think that a bailout package is warranted at this stage?
Look, we have to bear in mind that in terms of EU rules, the EU itself is not allowed to bail out constituent countries. But that doesn't prevent other countries from coming along with when they have like interests in a country like Greece, for example. German banks, I mean, they're pretty heavily represented in Greece. It's in their interest to do something about it. I have no doubt about it that something will be done. I mean, it's in many ways we talk about banks being too big to fail. Countries are too big to fail. Not especially Greece. It's a $350 billion economy. It's about a quarter the size of Spain. I think Spain is the really interesting one in the piggies, as they're called these days. It's a $1.4 trillion economy, top 15 in the world. It's got an unemployment rate of 18% and 25%. The people aged 25 and below. There's a 40% unemployment rate. It's and like Greece, it's got a very, very large budget deficit. I think in the same way, though, that Dubai was never going to be allowed to collapse because of the fact that the rest of the UAE would come to its aid. I don't think Greece or Portugal or Spain or Italy or Ireland is going to be allowed to fail either. But what it is going to mean is a very long, protracted and painful structural adjustment program in all of these countries. And there's a political element to this. Lest we forget, it's not so long ago, as recently as the 1970s, that Greece had a military junta, for example. Spain had a fascist dictatorship. So, politically, the EU can't allow any of these countries to just disappear and fall out of the Eurozone.
You speak of structural adjustments in the Eurozone. Are you concerned about where the Euro is going to be going from these levels? Because initially we heard when the Euro started weakening that it's a great buy, and then we heard that be very cautious when dealing with the Euro. Perhaps, the Euro is fundamentally flawed, more fundamentally flawed than what the dollar is.
It's more fundamentally flawed in the sense that we're not talking about a homogeneous situation with Europe. We're talking about people with different cultures, with different languages, and they've only been together for a few years, whereas the US has been around for a couple of hundred years. So yes, I mean, I think there's that argument to it. But having said that, I think the Eurozone has probably got greater scope to rebound than the US has. So look, I think a lot of traders are seeing this as a great opportunity. Sell the euro, buy the dollar, blah blah blah. It's great for markets, but fundamentally, I don't see the euro going substantially lower from these levels.
Fed Chairman Bernanke rattled the markets yesterday with some of his comments regarding the rate at which the Fed lends money to the banks, which has been at 0.5% since December 2008. And he said that if we do see some kind of unwinding, that's where the unwinding would occur. Is this a signal, a formal signal that the Fed is going to be pulling back on stimulus?
No, I don't think so, and it's nothing out of the ordinary. Bernanke's been talking about this for quite a while now. What he's effectively saying is that 6 months, 9 months, maybe a year down the track, yes, there may well have to be tightening, but that all depends on how profound the recovery is in the US. And at this point in time, it's looking decidedly patchy. Yes, we saw 5.7% in the last quarter of 2009, but a lot of that was due to technical factors, restocking not being the least of it. So I think we have to see more sustainable prints coming out of the US before we can really get confident that he's going to start hiking rates.
Of course, unemployment's still an issue. It's much better now. It's at 9.7%. Unemployment, though, and of course the state of the US consumer is still a problem.
Absolutely. At 10%, it's still unacceptably high. And it comes back to what I said earlier, that we're only going to see a sustainable recovery in the US once consumers start coming back to the party. Now, consumers can't start coming back to the party unless they're gainfully employed. So, we're not looking at this in isolation. All of these events are connected.
Unemployment here in South Africa is slightly better than 24.5%. We're currently sitting at around 24.3%, Chris. The South African consumer is still very much under pressure. We've got the State of the Union address today, by Jacob Zuma. What are you expecting on that front? Obviously, unemployment is going to be key on the agenda.
Yeah. And look, I think the president's going to have to be careful here not to make promises that he can't deliver on. I mean, he said he'd create 500,000 jobs at the end of last year.
And we lost 1 million.
Exactly, well, 870,000 or thereabouts. So, I think he has to be careful about giving people false hope. It's a difficult one. I suspect two things. He won't want to upstage Pravin Gordhan's budget next month, so I think there'll be scant reference to purely economic factors. I think what he'll do is see it as an opportunity to talk about the impending World Cup, for example, and talk about uniting South Africans behind this type of thing. I think it'll be a feel-good type of State of the Nation address.
ArcelorMittal came out with results yesterday and says it's still relatively cautious about embarking on an aggressive expansion program here in South Africa, just proving that South Africa's demand for steel and steel products is still under pressure, and unfortunately still a lot of uncertainty here in the country. What did you make of those numbers, Chris?
I went to the presentation yesterday and I was blown away by Nonkululeko Siyabiza Haita, see I can pronounce her name. But I mean, she really gave a master performance. And she made a couple of points. First of all, we're seeing the earnings turning around quite appreciably. It's not beyond the bounds of possibility that we get back to the 2008 figures fairly rapidly. But secondly, we're talking about the cost inputs here, and on the electricity side, comes hard on the heels of Goldfields and Harmony, talking about just how profound those electricity input increases are going to be. So, you know, I tend to treat this one a bit like Sappi. It's a stock that you buy at a high PE and perhaps sell at a low PE. The recovery is going to be patchy, we know that. And I think their sales into that recovering economy are also going to be tempered a bit.
Another point of concern, they've been rolling over the same steel prices since December last year, despite the fact that steel prices globally have risen. And this is due to the rand. Obviously, the rand, a big problem. I actually spoke to the CEO yesterday and she said, you know, they would like to see the rand at around 10 rand to the dollar. And she laughed about it, but obviously the rand has been hampering a lot of resource companies. It's not just ArcelorMittal. How much longer do you think the rand is going to stay at these levels for, Chris?
How long is a piece of string? How long is the dollar going to stay relatively weak? And it comes back to your earlier point about Bernanke. The moment he starts hiking rates in the US, you're going to see a flight, I think, back into the dollar. And once that happens, we're going to see a movement out of all emerging market currencies, including the rand. But that probably isn't going to happen for the next 6 to 9 months.
But emerging markets at this stage are offering that growth. So perhaps emerging market currencies are going to be boosted by the fact that there is just so much excess liquidity sitting on the sidelines, and they will be going into the big growth sectors.
No, that's quite right. And we're riding on the back of that wave of optimism. So, I mean, you look around the world, and I don't want to get into the whole debate about decoupling, but I think it is becoming clear that the developing world, the emerging markets, are starting to show significantly better growth than the developed world. And while that persists, I think, as you rightly say, investor money is going to flow more into those markets.
Chris, is it about commodities right now? We know that the euro-dollar obviously hampering some of the gains that we should be seeing on the commodities front, but demand for commodities has been pushed higher, of course, by China, by India, by the likes of Brazil as well. So again, emerging market focus at this stage, but how much longer can this carry on for? I mean, is it sustainable?
Look, I think it's sustainable as long as we don't have a bubble. And that is the big worry. We've
look at the numbers that came through from BHP Bulletin, looking relatively robust, but again, uncertainty going forward.
Quite right. BHP talking about, what, 21% of their earnings coming out of China, 20% out of Europe. I think all the big mining companies are seeing this demand coming out from the Far East. As long as that is sustainable, as long as we don't have a big bubble that bursts, and that is a danger, and we mentioned it in this program before, then I think the commodity area is the one probably to be playing in at this point in time.
So you'll be buying commodity stocks. Which would you be buying, Chris?
We still like them, but we like the heavier guys, the likes of Kumba Iron Ore, for example. And I know ArcelorMittal is not exactly a commodity stock, but it's in a similar thing. And as I said before, I think at these levels, it's looking very interesting indeed.